Jihad Guru Name, Jihad Guru Name, Sat Guru Name, Sri Guru Dev Name, Jihad Guru Name, Jihad Guru Name, Sat Guru Name, Sri Guru Dev Name, Jihad Guru Name, Jihad Guru Name, Sat Guru Name, Sri Guru Dev Name. My name is Guru Fateh Singh. I'm a teacher of Kundalini Yoga. I do other things. I'm a student of Yogi Bhajan from his lineage. And I want to share with you today. I was thinking this morning, wow, there's a movement, a separatist movement, there's a secessionist movement going on. People want to move out, separate, cut themselves off, and they don't know our tradition. They don't know the tradition of Kundalini Yoga, Yogi Bhajan, the Sikh tradition. And then I realized, well, they don't know because nobody's telling them. I better get off my butt, do some sharing. Okay, I have no special position. KRI doesn't think much of me. BBG doesn't return my calls. Minister religion, same. But Yogi Bhajan did appoint me as a minister, so it's a very humble position. So I'm going to minister a little bit today, and I hope to be of service. Maybe you'll learn something. So let's start with Guru Nanak. I'm not going to do a long, long talk. I'm going to just skim through 500 years. But I just want you to know just a few basic things. Like Guru Nanak started his basic mantra, Ik Onkar. Ik means one, right? Oneness. So Guru Nanak's mission was, a good part of it was bringing people together. So he wanted to uplift women. There was a big duality there. Men are up, women are down. Wanted to lift up women, Manda Jamiya, Manda Nimiya. He wanted to bring the yogis back from the forest, bring people together. He wanted to um, help to heal the fissures, the stratification in the caste system, to make people feel that everybody is brother, sister. Um, so he was onto the Brahmins about that, about their elitism. He was onto the fanatic Muslims about cutting themselves off and saying, if you're not a Muslim, you're dead. And so he was a unifier, and he traveled widely, before the age of the internet, and he shared that message of unity about humanity, one creator, all in one. So that was good. That was nice. That was fun. Um, he had one disciple who was a famous disciple who was a Muslim. And by Mardana, he accompanied him and played. And by Bala was Hindu, and they never felt their religious tradition was threatened in any way. To their end, they were considered his Hindu Sikh, his Hindu disciple, and his Muslim disciple. Nobody thought anything of it. Um, so life went on. He passed his lineage on. First, he inspired everybody, did his best, and created one great disciple. Guru Angad was number one, and so he passed his responsibilities on to Angad, and that went okay. Guru Angad compiled his teacher's writings and his songs, and inspired others, and eventually Amar Das, the third guru, became guru. But um, Angad had a son called Datu, and Datu didn't like that. Datu was annoyed that Amar Das, who had been serving his father, uh, inherited the guruship. And so Datu came one day and told off Amar Das, and he kicked him so hard that Amar Das fell over. And Amar Das said, "Okay, I'm going back to my village. You take over." So there was a split. Huh? Of course, Amar Das had the inspiration and he had the big heart, and so over time, people saw that Amar Das is the guru, not Datu. Um, Datu is just an angry discontent. He has some power issues. But so it carried on. So Amar Das taught, and he had a son called Ram Das, and Ram Das had three children, and one of them was Arjun. Arjun became the next guru, but Arjun had a big brother called Prithvi Chand. And Prithvi Chand was not very happy about the way things were going. And so through his life, to the end of his life, he contested Arjun's um, authority. And so he made trouble for Arjun through his whole life. So there was a split right? And some Sikhs, they were just confused, and they said, "Who's the guru? You know, is it the Guru Ramdas's first son or his third son?" And many thought, well, first son has precedence, so it must be Prithvi. And so that went on, and that went on for years. It was just miserable, and and then Hargobind became the guru, and then Harai became the guru. But Hargobind had a grandson whose name was Dirmal, and he wasn't very happy about that. He said, "I should be the guru." So for a while, Prithvi Chand and Dirmal, they were buddies, and they were both contesting, who's the boss, who's the holiest, who's the best, and that went on, you know. So there's never been any. It's been very rare where there's been real unanimity. Everybody's all happy together. There's been conflict and conflict and conflict. The ego has always been there. And then came Harai. Guru Harai, he needed to pass on his guruship, and he sent his eldest son to Aurangzeb, and Aurangzeb um, wanted Ram Rai, the eldest son, to do some tricks, and Ram Rai obliged and did some tricks, and he came home, and his dad, the guru, said, you're not in this house anymore, and so he gave the guruship to 5-year-old um, Harkishan. Yeah. So then Ram Rai was also competing and contesting the guruship. So that went on, and there's a whole new sect created, the Ram Rayas, and so conflict continues. And in the time of Guru Gobind Singh, even before he became Singh, when he was Guru Gobind Rai, he was challenging his ministers. He was challenging those who were collecting the tithing, collecting the money to support the mission, for taking a lot of it for themselves. And some of them he just threw out. So there was conflict. He had kind of conflict with these guys. They were called the Masands. And that went on. That went on. Yogi told the story that one day was just so bad that he got the Masangs and made them into pakoras and fed the pakoras to the Sangha. That's how bad it was. Um, just before Guru Gobind Singh passed, he gave a job to a great Sikh of his, um, we called Banda Bahadur. And he gave him 5 arrows. And he sent him north to Punjab. The Guru was down in the south at that time. And he said, go challenge the Mughal authority. The Mughals were just oppressing everybody under Aurangzeb, and he did a good job, Banda Bahadur. He took them on. They succeeded in many battles. They did something that is still the heritage of the people of Punjab today, of North India. He got rid of the landlord system. He let people own their own land, and that to this day in North India, people own their own land. In South India, still there are landlords who own a whole lot of land that they don't farm. But in the north, that's one of the great things that Banda Bahadur did. But again, Sikhs divided and they said, oh, these are the Banda Bahadur Singhs and he's not a real Sikh and blah, blah, blah. It didn't last very long. Banda Bahadur did a lot. But after about 6 years, he was captured and tortured. And that was the end of Banda Bahadur. And then the Sikhs had a long time living in the jungles and the forests, and that was a time for unity. They did have little groups called missals, but by and large they cooperated. Came Maharaja Ranjit Singh around 1799. He brought together some of the missals, not all, the majority of them, the powerful ones, and they started to expand and created the kingdom of Punjab. But it was never all the Sikhs. And when the British came around in the 1840s and they wanted to attack this kingdom that Maharaja Ranjit Singh had made, they also had some Sikhs. The Sikhs from Patiala and Kapurthala, they were fighting with the British. And the British liked them. You know, they would tie up their beards and so on and so forth. So there was division again. There was division. You had the pro-British Sikhs, the anti-British Sikhs. There were two wars. And still you had if you were anti-British and you're under the British, they just messed you up really bad. They take away your land, take away, they, they could put you in jail, they could blow you away with a cannon. They were serious. So there was division then, the pros and the antis, which went on for some time until finally, after the massacre, the British massacred hundreds of people in Amritsar. It's called the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. Then the Sikhs really started to see the need to come together, and they did. And they formed the SGPC to throw the British and their lackeys out of the Gurdwaras, and that was quite a milestone. Baba Karak Singh, he basically took leadership of all the Sikhs, not only the pro-British Sikhs, the aristocracy, but also the grassroots Sikhs. And he was one of the great Sikhs of the 20th century. He brought people together. And then people were aspiring for independence, and so Sikhs and Hindus and Muslims and Parsis and everybody was fighting for that. When finally independence came, Sikhs were not given their rightful due. They were not given a state where they could be Sikhs, where they could be in majority, where they could speak Punjabi. And that took a lot of struggle and struggle and struggle. Finally, Sardar Hukum Singh, he very cleverly, very smart man, he was able to work through Parliament, through committee, to actually get that. Just just as Indira Gandhi became prime minister, and she became a very big foe of most of the Sikhs. That was difficult. And in fact, she created another division in the Sikhs, where you have the hardline Sikhs, and then you have the SGP Sikhs, you have the Akali Dal Sikhs, and she built that division up. You had Bhindranwale on the one side, you had Gyani Zail Singh on the other side. I want you to know the scene. I'm not going to bother you, but again, there was a division, and the division got so bad that in 1984 there was practically a war. In the Golden Temple, Kal Takht was attacked, and many, many people died, and there was martial law for many years. Great division between those people who wanted their own homeland and those Sikhs who didn't. Um, the president of India, Gyani Zail Singh, uh, many people said, you should quit. Uh, Yogi Bhajan, my teacher, told them, don't quit. Because if you quit, then Sikhs will be known as traitors, they'll be known as anti India, and the Sikhs that have been killed already in massacres in Delhi and elsewhere, that'll just be a foreshadowing. It'll just be a little bit of a preview of what's going to happen. It's going to be really, really bad. So he encouraged Gyani Zail Singh to stay on, and he did. And through the years, Yogi Bhajan continued to speak with all sides, those that weren't killed or in jail, um, to try and effect some conciliation, to make peace, to get rid of the martial law, so that Sikhs can live in dignity and in peace and not have their children killed or thrown in jail, so this reign of terror could come to an end. And finally, in 1995, there was a World Sikh Conference. Um, I mean, there's politics everywhere. People don't like to give credit, but my understanding is that the president of the SGPC, Gurcharan Singh Tora, together with Yogi worked very hard to make that happen. And to the last minute, I wasn't sure whether it was going to happen, but it did. In September of 1995, there was a big conference, and it was a watershed moment that peace had returned to Punjab after many thousands of people had been killed, and still there were people in jail, and still Jaswant Singh Kalra, who was a great human rights activist, during that session, he was kidnapped by the police and put to death. So all was not well, but still, generally, the trend was towards peace. And I think it was largely because of Yogiji's work in bringing all parties together, sworn enemies, that he was given another title. It was called Pant Ratan in 1999 at the World Gathering for the celebration of the 300th birthday of the Khalsa in 1999. So that's India. Yogi Ji, let's tell this story in coming to the West. I mean, first of all, Yogi Ji had teachers. He studied from everybody. A lot of his swamis that he'd studied from were Hindu, obviously. A swami is a Hindu. And when he came to North America, he taught everybody without discrimination. He taught, you know, everybody. He taught Canadians, he taught Americans, he taught young, he taught old, women, men, girls, boys. all races. He had no discrimination. And he also reached out to the yoga teachers who were starting to arrive in India, mostly quite isolated, you know. So he had a friend in Swami Satchidananda, made friends with Swami Chinmayananda, Vishnu Devananda. There's a list, you know, all the Swamis. He made a point of meeting them, gathering together. They would have meetings just because this was the nature of Yogi Bhajan, with all their differences. He even got the Bhajans who never left India. He got them together to come for the World Sikh Conference. And, you know, they have the mask over their face. They're vegetarian. They don't breathe insect. Now everybody's got a mask over their face, unless you're doing a video. But if you go in public, so those the only people wearing masks back then. And he actually got them to come to North America. And they also, I was just looking in the photo library, and they got to meet the starter of the Hare Krishna movement, Prabhupada, and which was huge because Prabhupada is very, very narrow. You know, either it's Hare Krishna or it's nothing. And he wouldn't come to a big conference the Yogaji hosted in New Mexico in 1975. He was going to all these multi-faith conferences. That was part of what he did. And no, the Hare Krishna guy wouldn't go. So they went to see him in San Francisco, and just to make friends, just to talk, just to open doors, make bridges. And that was the nature of Yogi Bhajan. You know, he would go out, he would reach out. Um, we all know that, you know, he would counsel people, he would marry people, and they would counsel and counsel to keep people married. He counseled me to keep me married. You know, he counseled, he never gave up. You know, I wanted divorce, he wanted marriage. That was his nature. He was always counseling. Eventually, he stopped doing marriages because he realized we didn't take them as seriously as he wanted us to take them. Um, and but he continued to counsel people to keep them together, and and he told us, you know, we shouldn't live at each other. We shouldn't live at each other. We uh, shouldn't live with each other. We should live for each other. That was his philosophy all along. And we are the people of love. That's what he taught. That's what he taught. And yeah, so we have a new chapter. We have a chapter. Yogi Bhajan had a secretary, a very high-ranking secretary in his organization, who became uh, disaffected. She wanted to do what she wanted to do, and she wanted to get married. Wanted to marry a married man. Well, whatever. Yogi Bhajan made it work. Tried to keep it graceful. And then she was paid. She was paid quite well. Another person was paid quite well to do a court case against Yogi Bhajan because somebody didn't like Yogi Bhajan. They didn't like the idea of unity at all. And so that court case didn't happen because actually it's illegal in the United States to pay somebody to take somebody to court. And so that didn't go to court. Afterwards, this disaffected secretary, she um, she came to New Mexico. She lived there for about a year and a half, tried to make peace with Yogi Bhajan. Yeah, and but people were quite annoyed with her for her betrayal. Yogi Bhajan had a big heart. You know, he's the unifier. He wanted to bring her back on board, but the people around him wouldn't hear about it. And so she stayed for about a year and a half. She wasn't going to get back her position because it just wasn't going to work. And so she went back to Hawaii and back to doing whatever she did, and until she wrote a book, a big tell-all book. And now we have the Me Too movement, which um, don't get me wrong, you know, it's a very timely movement. There's a lot of abuse of women, all kinds of abuse. There's a glass ceiling, you know, limitations to where they can go as a culture. As a, you know, name me a culture that isn't putting limitations on and where women are not being limited. There are just a few. In Kerala, there's a matriarchal culture. The Iroquois traditionally are a matriarchal culture. There's a few. But by and large, you know, the cultures, the big rich cultures of Japan and of Europe and of North America, they're all hierarchical, patriarchal, male dominated cultures. And wherever you almost everywhere you have that, you have abuse, and it's under the carpet, and it's nasty, it's toxic. And so, Me Too movement, I'm with the Me Too movement. I'm just not crazy. I'm not insane. There's a governor of Michigan, and she is a victim. It's well known. She's a victim of sexual violence, and she healed herself. But she said herself last year when allegations were coming up against the presidential candidate Biden, she said, women have a tendency to jump on the bandwagon whenever there's an accusation of sexual abuse. And frankly, not everybody who gets accused is a Bill Cosby or a Weinstein or an Epstein. Not everybody fits into that category. So what I've seen is that this disaffected student of Yogi Bhajan, with her agenda, with a book now to sell, she was very successful in tapping into a lot of uh, pent up energy in what is sometimes called the second generation, third generation of the 3HO movement. People who are now, some of them 50 years old, but they're not Yogi Bhajan's original students. And they have stories to tell about going to India and feeling abandoned in the school there. They have stories about being bullied over there. And, they're not happy stories. Some experienced sexual abuse, which still hasn't been addressed. Um, and she tapped into that and gave them a voice, and and they felt very empowered. But it's a very the things they had to say with that voice um, were very angry, and God bless them. I can understand that. I can totally understand that. What I'm not buying into is the idea that we should destroy what Yogi Bhajan created out of years and years and years of working for unity and inspiring people. We should live for each other. So I would pray that people think again. If Yogi Bhajan taught oneness, if Guru Nanak taught oneness, um, if we learn two-ness, did we really learn anything? Really? You know, um, I recall in I think it was 84, Yogi Bhajan sent a card, and he said, Sikhs are on the cross, and and they were, Sikhs were being crucified, almost literally. There are a lot of different ways of torturing a person, but the Sikh nation was on the cross, and I put that on Facebook, and I got a lot of likes, you know. But it's much easier to do a like about that, and maybe to wear a little cross around your neck, than it is to actually live like a Christ, or to live like a Yogi Bhajan, to take on the pain of abuse and people who just want to do their own thing. Uh, it's very difficult to be a unifier. When you're a unifier, people are going to blame you very often on both sides. But that's the position Yogi Bhajan took. It's the position Guru Nanak took, Guru Gobind Singh took. It's a difficult tradition. And I'll encourage you to study Yogi Bhajan's teachings deeply and see what a unifier he was and is. Don't be playing with matches and saying, oh, well, we can burn the house down, we can make another house. It's not easy to make a house, it takes a lot. So please meditate on oneness and see what you can do. That's what yoga is. Yoga is oneness. Yoga means union. Yeah, doesn't mean anything else. It means union. So God bless you. I feel you in my heart. I pray for unity for all of us. Pray for uplift, for healing and forgiveness. And may the long time sun shine on all of us. God bless you. Satnam.